Hey guys, I'm Richii Wainwright, and today I want to show you how I go about dialing in a killer modern metal bass tone in Cubase. Let's jump in. So I've already laid down some drums here, and we're just going to start with a clean DI bass track. So first let's lay down a riff, and then I'll show you how we can turn this into a super heavy modern bass tone. Okay, so how do we turn this raw DI track into the modern sound that we're looking for? Well, before we focus on any plugins, the sound actually starts at the DI. There are two very important elements a modern metal bass tone has to have, and they are consistency and the gritty, grinding distortion. And both of those things start here with the DI and with the way that I'm playing. So here you can see, as far as consistency, this waveform is staying pretty even. Jumps up a little bit, but I'm really trying with my playing to keep it so that I'm hitting the string with the same amount of force every time. You don't want to see this like jumping up and then down and up again. Like, you want a nice consistent waveform. More on why that's important later, but for now just keep it in mind. Consistency is very important. And secondly, the distortion sound we're looking for also starts here because I'm playing very aggressively and with a pick, which is another important step before we even talk about any plugins, because we need that immediate percussive pick attack to get the modern bass sound. I also restrung this bass not too long ago, which is another thing that can help if you're going for that bright metallic modern sound. It can be really difficult to get that out of dead old strings. So that's all the first steps we need to consider to make sure our DI is setting us up perfectly for a great modern metal tone. Now let's focus on what we can do in here. And this is going to be all about parallel processing. So the first thing I'm going to do is separate our bass audio across two tracks, because we're going to want to process the low frequencies and high frequencies in different ways. Let's start by working on the low track, and this is going to be the simple one because we basically want to leave the lows alone. We don't want to use an amp, we don't want to use distortion, we just want to leave it as a clean DI so we're getting nice clear low end. And the first thing I want to do with this track is just isolate the low end by filtering out all those high frequencies. And maybe, yeah, we just boost those sub frequencies around 70 or 80 hertz. So now this is just a sub bass track where we can handle the low end in a different way to the highs. And the only other thing I want to do with this track is just add some compression to get it super consistent. We already tried to get a really consistent performance, but we want to make sure we tame every peak so that the sub frequencies don't jump up and down, because in a modern metal mix, they want to be really consistent. So I'm going to be looking for maybe 5, 6, or 7 dB of gain reduction. Maybe we try an 8:1 ratio. So I'm going to leave our sub track like that, and in a minute it will make perfect sense why we've handled the low end in this way. For now, let's just focus on the other track for a minute. And the first thing we want to do with this track is just mirror what we did with the bass track. So we wanted all the low frequencies in that one. We want to make sure we don't get any of those. And we just get everything above those frequencies here. Okay, so now we've isolated the frequencies, so we have a low track and a high track, and they're not crossing over. So now we can process the mid-range and high end in a way that's different to the low end. And for this, I want to use VST bass amp, and my favorite amp in this plugin is the iTech. For me, this just has like a really modern sound. And I'm using this first cab because it has a nice mid-scooped sound, but a really smooth high end as well. It's not too harsh. Of course, we want full gain. And we don't want any bass here because the other track is doing that job for us. Maybe a nice high mid boost around 1 or 2K. Okay, so we have a solid amp tone to start with, but now it's going to be all about putting things in front of the amp to push the tone harder and make it more aggressive. And I want to start with a bit of tape saturation from the Magneto plugin. Oh, I like that all the way up. Just makes everything a bit more in your face, a bit more aggressive. And saturation is great for this because it's not going to destroy the clarity like a full-on distortion would. And let's also use the DI driver. I love using this on bass. Again, that sounds great with the drive all the way up. And this isn't just a distortion plugin, it's shaping the tone. Do you hear how it's cleaning up the mid-range for us? That's starting to sound awesome already. Okay, so the VST amp rack has given us a great tone to work from, but we want to get way more aggressive still from here, so let's put a couple of distortion plugins in front of the amp here. And one of my favorite plugins for making bass guitars sound more aggressive is the Black Valve, and just like the Magneto that we used in here, which is a tape saturator, this is going to add some tube saturation, which again is more gentle than a full-on distortion plugin, so it's not going to destroy the clarity of our bass, but it's going to just push it a little harder. So let's push the drive and gain a little bit here. And maybe a little compression. That's getting super nasty now, and it's not just distorting the tone, it also adds so much fullness. Listen to how much like bigger and fuller the tone sounds when we have that on. Everything just gets really in your face. So that's given us that overall fullness and aggression, but now I want to use one more distortion in front of the amp to specifically focus in on that grinding high mid-range. The 1 to 2K frequency range is very important for getting this kind of tone, and we have the perfect plugin here in Cubase for that kind of thing. So we're going to use the Destroyer to get a little more distortion, and stay with me here because in a minute this is all going to come together and make perfect sense. So the reason we want this plugin is because we can specifically focus these bands so that we're just distorting the range that we want. So we'll just go for the kind of 600 to 2K frequency range. That's where the grinding pick attack is. That's such an important part of this sound. And let's get really aggressive with the distortion here. Okay, so obviously with that on 100%, it sounds kind of like we're destroying the entire tone. But that's what I love about the Destroyer. You can make it parallel, so we can blend in a little bit of the distorted signal until it's just distorting the right amount. So we still have all the clarity there, but we're just getting a bit more of that grinding distortion in the background. Let's blend this in until we have the right balance of clarity and aggression. Okay, so we have the solid tone from VST amp rack. We've added the Black Valve and the Destroyer in front of the amp to push the tone before it hits the amp. Now, something I like to do as a final touch after the amp is just smooth everything out with a bit of compression because we've gone kind of crazy with the distortion. And again, we're kind of coming back to this idea of the bass being very aggressive, but also very tight, consistent, and smooth. Compression is going to help us to get there. We want to make sure the bass isn't going to jump out of a mix every time my pick hits the strings. So I'm going to use some very aggressive compression from the Squasher plugin. And the first thing we're going to do is just turn off the low band because we don't want to focus on the low frequencies here. And I'm going to bring up this second band, so we're really focusing on the mid-range with this. And let's go super hard. Listen, if I turn this off and on a couple of times, it's still super aggressive, but it's just a little more tamed and controlled, so it's going to work in a mix. Here's what the Squasher is doing for us. Okay, and as a final touch, let's just see if we can clean up this tone a little bit more with some EQ so it's super focused and just got the frequencies we want. And I already know that running this tone through the VST bass amp has probably introduced some bass frequencies because amps tend to do that. So let's just once again filter out all that low end. And we also want to filter out the highs because you never really want anything too high in a bass, maybe about 6K. And let's maybe just dip the low mids down a little with a little shelf. And maybe it's a little harsh around 3K. Okay, that sounds good to me. We're basically just making sure there's none of that low end that we don't need in this tone. No clicky, aggressive high end that's going to jump out in a mix. And no mid-range frequencies getting out of control, because obviously we've really focused on the mid-range in this track. So all that distortion and compression can sometimes mean around 3K or maybe around 600 hertz. You maybe get some harshness or some boomy frequencies, and you just want to make sure you sculpt the tone so that it's as powerful as possible. Okay, so now if we combine our low and high tones together, we get this. So that is pretty much the formula for the kind of bass sound we hear in almost all modern metal today. We have our clean, compressed, and consistent sub-frequencies that are not being distorted or affected in any way. And then we have this aggressive but smooth mid-range that is really focused in on that grinding 1 to 2 kilohertz frequency range, which is where we find all that aggression, that metallic clankiness, all the things we associate with a modern metal bass tone. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this bass tone deep dive, and what I want to know is, what are your favorite examples of this modern kind of bass tone? What band has absolutely nailed this tone better than anyone else? Let me know below. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.